A sailor collapses in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The nearest hospital is over 1,000 miles away. No ambulance, no road, no 911. What happens next is something most Americans have never heard about. U.S. Navy aircraft carriers are the most powerful warships ever built. But hidden deep inside those steel giants is something nobody talks about. A fully working hospital. Real surgeons, real operating rooms, real emergency surgery, all happening inside a warship, sometimes right in the middle of a combat zone. Today, we are going inside. This is the untold story of how aircraft carriers handle medical emergencies in the middle of the ocean, and the heroes keeping 5,000 Americans alive when help is completely out of reach. If this makes you proud of our military, drop the word proud in the comments right now.
Lungs are clear. What about the abdomen?
Introduction. Now, before we go any further, let's set the stage, because you need to understand the scale of the problem before you can appreciate the solution. An aircraft carrier is not just a ship. It is a small city. A Nimitz-class carrier carries between 4,500 and 5,000 sailors and personnel when the full air wing is aboard. That is the population of a small American town. And that town is going to be at sea for 6 months or more, sometimes in some of the most dangerous corners of the world. Think about what it means to keep 5,000 people healthy in the middle of the ocean. On any given day, someone might have a heart attack. Someone might break a bone. Someone might need emergency surgery. Someone might be dealing with a serious infection that is spreading fast, and there is nowhere to go. No urgent care down the street, no local ER around the corner. So the Navy built the solution directly into the ship itself, and what they built is genuinely remarkable. The hospital hidden inside a warship. The medical facility on a U.S. aircraft carrier is called Sick Bay. That name makes it sound like a small room with cots and aspirin. It is nothing of the sort. On a Nimitz-class carrier, the kind that has been the backbone of the U.S. fleet for decades, Sick Bay includes a 53-bed hospital ward, a 3-bed intensive care unit, a fully equipped operating room, dental facilities, a pharmacy, a working laboratory, and X-ray capabilities. That operating room has a surgical table bolted directly to the deck so it does not move when the ship rolls in rough seas. The newer Gerald R. Ford-class carriers, America's most advanced warships, carry a hospital with 41 beds in the ward, a 3-bed intensive care unit, a 2-bed emergency room, a full laboratory, a pharmacy, and a dedicated operating room. The medical staff on the Ford alone includes 11 medical officers and 30 hospital corpsmen. And here is something that might genuinely surprise you. The aircraft carrier's hospital does not just serve the people on that one ship. It serves as the medical hub for the entire carrier strike group. The destroyers, cruisers, support ships, and submarines all operating in the waters around it. If any of those ships has a medical emergency they cannot handle on their own, the patient comes to the carrier. One carrier, one hospital, serving the entire fleet, in the middle of the ocean. The people who make it work. Now let's talk about the team running this floating hospital, because these men and women deserve to be recognized by every American watching this. On a typical Nimitz-class carrier, you have around 40 medical personnel and 20 dental personnel. That includes doctors, nurses, surgeons, anesthesiologists, and about 60 hospital corpsmen. When the air wing is fully aboard, 2 flight surgeons and several aviation medicine technicians join the team as well. The hospital corpsman is the heart of the whole operation. These are enlisted sailors who go through intense training to become the first line of medical response on the ship. They take vital signs, draw blood, assist in surgery, administer medications, and deliver emergency care at any hour of the day or night. They are trained to do things that would genuinely surprise most civilian medical professionals. The ship's nurse is another key figure. On USS Theodore Roosevelt, Lieutenant Lauren Clark, who joined the ship in May of 2022, brought intensive care unit experience and training with mobile surgical teams. She described her job as running a hospital in the middle of the ocean, sometimes in hostile territory, where you cannot always call for outside help. Her entire focus was on training the corpsmen to the highest possible standard, because when something goes wrong out there, there is no time to figure things out on the spot. The ship also carries mental health professionals, psychiatrists, and counselors, because months at sea in a high-stress, high-danger environment takes a toll on the mind just as much as the body. The Navy takes this seriously, and it is a standard part of carrier medical operations today. And here is one more thing most people do not know. Aircraft carriers can perform blood transfusions. They maintain a supply of packed red blood cells and have the ability to perform what is called an autotransfusion, where a patient's own blood is collected and returned directly to their body. That is life-saving capability sitting inside a warship that the public almost never hears about. What happens when a sailor goes down. Now let's get into what actually happens when someone has a real emergency aboard one of these ships, because the process is more detailed and more impressive than most people ever imagine. First, every single sailor on the ship goes through basic medical training. The Navy calls it self-aid and buddy care. Every person on that carrier knows how to stabilize a wound, manage bleeding, and keep a fellow sailor alive until the medical team arrives. This is not optional. It is required of every person who boards the ship. Beyond that, the carrier has multiple trauma stations spread throughout the vessel. These are small emergency treatment points positioned at different locations across the ship. In a battle or disaster situation, the medical team cannot always move freely, watertight hatches get sealed for damage control, and sections of the ship get cut off from each other. So the Navy placed emergency supplies and trained personnel in multiple spots across the carrier. The injured do not always come to the hospital. Sometimes the hospital goes to the injured. When a serious emergency hits, the medical team responds the same way an ER team would on shore, but with one critical difference. The ship's surgeon may look at the situation and decide that surgery is needed right away. At that point, the surgeon can actually request that the captain steer the ship into calmer water. Rough seas make surgery dangerous because even a bolted-down surgical table moves in heavy swells. Now here is the part that shows you how serious and how demanding this work really is. That request to change course can be denied. If the ship is in the middle of an active operation, if jets need to keep launching, if the mission cannot be paused, the captain may say no, and the surgeon has to perform that operation anyway, in whatever sea conditions exist at that moment. That is the reality of medicine at sea. The mission and the patient are both priorities at the same time, and someone has to make that call every single time an emergency happens. Before we go any further, take 5 seconds right now and hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Over 98% of people watching this have not subscribed yet. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it makes a real difference in helping us bring you more stories like this one. A real surgery in the middle of the Pacific. Now let's talk about a real event. Not a drill, not a training exercise, something that actually happened and was officially reported by the U.S. Navy. On August 9, 2024, the medical department aboard USS Carl Vinson, a Nimitz-class carrier operating in the Pacific Ocean, received a sailor who was experiencing severe abdominal pain. After a physical examination, it became clear this was not something that could wait. The sailor needed surgery. Immediately. Hundreds of miles from any shoreside medical facility, with no option to fly the patient out in time, the medical team did exactly what they were trained to do. They performed a full appendectomy right there, aboard the ship, while underway at sea. The surgery was successful. The sailor lived. The U.S. Pacific Fleet reported the entire event officially in September of 2024, not as something extraordinary, but as a demonstration of standard capability. Because that is what it is. It is not a miracle. It is what the Navy built, trained for, and maintains on every single one of these ships every day they are at sea. This is the part of the aircraft carrier story that almost never gets told. The flight deck gets all the cameras. The jets get all the attention. But deep inside that ship, A surgical team just saved a life that would have been lost on almost any other vessel in the world, and that is worth knowing. When the ship is not enough, medical evacuation. Every system has its limits. There are cases that go beyond what even a well-equipped carrier hospital can handle. When that happens, the Navy moves to what is called a medical evacuation, or medevac. If the carrier is close enough to land or to another facility, a patient can be moved by Seahawk helicopter to a shore-based hospital or to a larger medical ship. The U.S. Navy operates two dedicated hospital ships, USNS Mercy and USNS Comfort. Each one carries 12 operating rooms and up to 1,000 beds. When those ships are in the region, they serve as the next step up in care after the carrier. But medevac is not always an option. If the carrier is deep in the Pacific, in the middle of the Atlantic, or operating in a combat zone where aircraft cannot safely fly out, then evacuation is off the table entirely. The carrier's medical team handles it alone. No reinforcements, no backup, no second chance. This is exactly why the training on these ships never stops. The medical staff is always preparing for the scenario where there is no way out. Their skill, their equipment, and their readiness have to be the only solution available. The medical team on USS Theodore Roosevelt described it directly. They identified the worst possible scenarios ahead of time, being completely out of range for evacuation, losing satellite contact with specialists on shore, facing casualties they had never seen before, and they built their entire training program around those situations. That kind of mindset is what separates military medicine from nearly everything else practiced anywhere in the world. The technology changing everything. Here is something that will genuinely surprise most people watching this. One of the most powerful tools the Navy now uses on carriers is telemedicine, the ability to connect a shipboard doctor directly to a specialist on shore in real time through a secure satellite link. This is not just a simple video call. It means a sailor with a rare eye condition, a complex cardiac issue, or a neurological problem can receive a full consultation from a board-certified specialist sitting in a hospital somewhere in the United States, while the carrier is moving through a combat zone on the other side of the world. There is a documented medical case from a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier where a young sailor developed a serious eye condition while deployed at sea with no evacuation option available. Through military telemedicine, an ophthalmologist on shore guided the ship's medical team through the complete treatment process. The sailor's vision was saved. Without telemedicine, that sailor would almost certainly have lost sight permanently, and the Navy is pushing this technology even further. In November of 2024, the Defense Department put out an open call for companies to develop new mobile medical technology systems that can be fully integrated into Navy ships, with up to $2.7 million available for the program, and work set to begin in January of 2025. The future of carrier medicine is going to be more connected, more capable, and more life-saving than anything that has come before it. What this says about our military. Here is what this whole story really comes down to. The United States military does not just build weapons. It builds systems that protect the lives of the men and women carrying out the mission. Every carrier that sets sail carries with it a fully operational medical world, not because it looks good on a budget sheet, but because the Navy decided long ago that the people serving this country deserve every possible chance to come home alive. 5,000 Americans on a single ship. 6 months at sea. Sometimes in harm's way. And behind every one of them is a medical team that is trained for the worst day possible, equipped with blood transfusion capability, surgical teams on standby at any hour, mental health support, dental care, telemedicine, trauma stations scattered across the ship, and a group of hospital corpsmen who would run toward the emergency every single time. And here is something that stays with you. Civilian medicine in America has actually learned from carrier medicine. Trauma techniques developed by Navy doctors and corpsmen at sea have made their way into civilian emergency departments across the country. The innovations born out of necessity aboard these ships have saved lives on American streets. The ripple effect of what happens inside a carrier's sick bay goes far beyond the ocean it is sailing through. The next time you see footage of an FA-18 launching off a carrier deck or a news report about a strike group moving into position somewhere in the world, remember what is happening below that flight deck. Doctors and corpsmen are on watch. Surgical tools are prepped. A hospital is running at sea. That is the full picture of what a U.S. aircraft carrier really is. Conclusion. Most people will never see the inside of a carrier's medical ward. Most people will never know the name of a single hospital corpsman who served on one of these ships. But those men and women are out there right now, somewhere in the Pacific, somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere in open water far from home, making sure that the sailors around them have every chance to survive whatever comes next. That story deserved to be told. If this video gave you a new perspective on what our Navy really does, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss what we cover next.